Vivid verses.
The first time I noticed something was off, it was the soup course. Tomato bisque, made from scratch, finished with a swirl of creme fraiche and a single basil leaf, placed with the precision of a woman who had watched too many cooking shows and now believed plating was a form of breeding. Camille had been in the kitchen since 4. She had bought the tomatoes from the farmer's market on Saturday and told me about it twice. She had also told Bremer about it when he arrived and was now telling Adiz, who had not asked. I sat at the head of the table because Camille had put me there. She liked me there for dinner parties. She liked the geometry of it. I think me at one end, her at the other, the guests arranged in a small choreography of her design. She had a gift for arrangement. The apartment in the early months had bloomed under it. I had come home one evening to find the living room rotated 45 degrees and a new lamp where my reading chair used to be. And instead of irritation, I had felt something almost like gratitude. She saw the room I lived in better than I did. I had thought at the time, what was to be partnered. Across from me, Bremer was telling Adiz about a vacation. To my left, Tomas and his wife Ewa were laughing at something Camille had said about the basil. The candles were the right height. The wine was decanting. The bread, sliced and warm, sat in a linen-lined basket I did not own 3 months ago. She is good at this, I thought. She has always been good at this. I lifted my spoon. Oh, Camille said, before I forget, Henrik, tell them a story about your mother and the piano. I did not move my hand. I am not, by nature, a man whose face gives things away. I had learned by the time I was 14 that a still face was a kind of armor, and I had worn it long enough now that stillness was simply the shape my face took when something inside me was working. I felt my expression do nothing. I felt my eyes meet hers across the length of the table, and I felt her smile back at me, bright and easy, as though she had asked me to pass the salt. The story about my mother and the piano was not a story. It was a thing I had told her once in the dark 11 months ago after her own mother had called and made her cry, and we had sat up until 2 in the morning on the floor of the bedroom with the door closed. I had told her about my mother because she had told me about hers, and because I had wanted her to feel less alone, and because I had reached an age and a level of stability where I had begun, cautiously, to believe that some things could be said aloud to another person without becoming weapons. I had told her about the piano. I had told her about the day my mother had sold it and what she had said to me afterwards and what I had understood at 9 years old about the shape my childhood was going to take from then on. I had told her in confidence. I had not used the word, because using the word would have implied she might need to explain to her. We were both adults. We were sleeping in the same bed. The understanding was meant to be ambient. Oh, you have to, Adiz said, leaning forward. Camille's been holding out on us. There it is, I thought. It was very small, the thing I noticed. Adiz had said holding out on us, and her voice had carried the faintest weight of anticipation. Not the open curiosity of someone hearing the setup of a story for the first time, but the half-step-ahead lean of someone who had heard a version of it already and was waiting to hear it again, better this time, in front of the man it was about. There is a particular pitch a person's voice takes when they are pretending to be surprised. It is not quite a lie. It is a small social courtesy people do for one another. I had heard it 1,000 times in my professional life, and I had heard it now at my own table in the mouth of a woman I had liked. I let my eyes move slowly around the table. Bremer was smiling. Bremer's smile was the specific kind a man wears when he is trying to look interested in a story he has been told to find charming. Tomas had not looked up from his soup, which was a tell of its own. Tomas was a man who looked at people when they spoke. Ewa, beside him, had her napkin pressed to her mouth in a way that read, to me, like the small physical compression of someone holding a reaction down. All four of them have heard this before. I felt it land somewhere behind my sternum, cold and clean, and then I felt it stop landing and simply be true. The information was now in my possession. I had a moment, then, of something that was not anger, but its more useful cousin, clarity. A great deal of the last several months reordered itself in my mind, very quickly, the way a kaleidoscope reorders when you turn the barrel one click. The brunch in the autumn. The work dinner where Bremer's wife had touched my arm with what I had read at the time as ordinary warmth, and now understood as the soft gentleness people extend to a man they pity. The way Adiz, 2 weeks ago, had asked me how my mother was doing, and I had not, that I could remember, ever told Adiz that my mother was alive. She has been telling this story for months. She has been telling other stories, too. I set my spoon down. I did it carefully because I had not yet eaten the soup, and I did not want to eat it now, but I also did not want anyone at the table to register that I had stopped eating. I picked up my wine glass instead. Wine glasses are useful. They give a man something to do with his face. Camille was already telling it. She told it well. That was the part one attended to most carefully, the craft of it, the rhythm. She had done this before. She had it timed. She knew where the laugh was, and she set it up with a small comic widening of her eyes at the table that was not for me. She had taken the part about my mother saying the thing she had said, the part one had told her in the dark with my voice flat, because there was no other way to tell it, and she had repackaged it as the punchline of an anecdote about eccentric mothers and the things they say. She made it a bit. She made my mother into a character. She made me into a setup. I did not interrupt her. This is, I think, the hinge of the evening. The decision I made between the moment I understood what was happening and the moment I chose what to do about it. There were several available moves. I considered each one, briefly, the way you consider the lines on a chessboard. I could correct her. I could correct her gently. That's not quite how it went. Love, and watch her recover, watch her smooth it over, watch the table redirect, and lose the information I now had. I could correct her sharply, and detonate the dinner, and give her the high ground of having been embarrassed in front of her friends by a man with no sense of humor. I could leave the table. I could feign a phone call. I could allow my face to do the thing my face was perfectly capable of doing, which was to go very cold, very visibly, and let the temperature of the room drop until even Bremer noticed. None of them were good. The good move, the only good move, was the one she did not expect, which was to do nothing at all. So I did nothing at all. I let her finish. I let the laugh come, and Adiz laughed too long, which I noted, and Ewa laughed appropriately, which I also noted, and Bremer made the small affirming sound men make when they want a story to end without having to commit a real reaction. And Tomas, to his credit, glanced at me once. Just once. A flick of the eyes, neither of us acknowledging it. He knows, I thought. He has known for a while, and he hasn't liked it. I filed Tomas under a separate column. When the laugh had finished settling, I said, mildly, the basil is doing a lot of work in this soup. Camille, where did you find these tomatoes again? She lit up. The redirection landed exactly where I had aimed it, in the soft, sunlit field of her favorite subject, which was her own competence. She told the story of the tomatoes. She told it for almost 3 minutes. By the time she was done, the piano was forgotten by everyone except me and possibly Tomas, and certainly her, although she would not realize for some hours that what had been forgotten was not the same as what had been forgiven. I ate the soup. It was in fact very good. The rest of the dinner, I conducted the way a man conducts an orchestra he no longer particularly wants to keep employed, but has not yet had the meeting to dissolve. I was charming. I was warm. I asked Ewa about her sister's wedding and remembered the names of the bridesmaids. I refilled Bremer's glass before he asked, and I did the small, generous thing of pretending not to notice when Adiz put her elbow in the butter. I told one short story, one I had told 100 times, polished, harmless, about a flight delay and a dog, And I let Camille interrupt me twice and finish the punchline once, which I allowed because it cost me nothing and because I had already, by then, decided. By morning, I thought this would be over. It was a strange thing to sit at one's own dinner table and feel a marriage end. We were not technically married. We had been together long enough that the word had begun to appear in our mouths in the abstract. One day, eventually we should, and her mother used it sometimes on the phone in the way mothers do, half wishful and half declarative. I had not corrected her mother because I had not, until this evening, felt any need to. There was a ring in the second drawer of my dresser. I had bought it 8 weeks ago. I had not yet shown it to anyone. I had been waiting for a particular evening, a particular weather, a particular configuration of things. I had been quietly arranging the way one arranges a room. The ring would go back. That was a small, almost clerical thought, and I had it between the salad and the main course, and then I set it aside because I had a dinner to host. The main course was a roast. Camille had brined it for 36 hours. She told the table about the brine. Ewa asked for the recipe. Bremer made a comment about a brine he had once attempted at a cabin, and his story was bad, and we all laughed at it kindly, because that was the kind of evening Camille had built, and I had no interest, yet, in dismantling. Around 9, Adiz got tipsy in the careful way she always did, which was that she became more affectionate and less precise, and at one point she put her hand on my forearm, across the corner of the table, leaning in, and said, "Henrik, you're a saint. You know that? You're an absolute saint." I smiled at her. And there is again, I thought. A saint for what? Adiz. A saint why? The word hung there for half a second, and then she moved on, because she was tipsy, and because the company was loud, and because she had not, I think, fully heard herself say it. But I had heard her. Saint is a word people use about a man whose partner they have been told things about. Saint is what you call the man who is putting up with something. Saint is a word Adiz had no business applying to me on the basis of anything she had personally observed at this table, because I had behaved, in her presence, exactly like a man at a dinner party. The word had come from somewhere else. It had come from a conversation or a series of conversations in which my girlfriend had presented herself to her friends as a woman bearing a great deal, a woman with an eccentric partner, perhaps a man with a difficult mother, a man with a story. And her friends had risen, as friends do, to the role they had been cast in, which was a supportive audience for her quiet, brave, entertaining endurance. She has been building this for a long time, I thought, and tonight was just the part where she let me see it. That was, in a way, the part that interested me most. Not the betrayal itself. Betrayal is a word I find melodramatic for what was fundamentally a category of behavior I had observed in human beings my entire life, but the timing. Why now? Why this dinner? Why this story? Why with the eye contact she had made when she said, "Henrik, tell them," the eye contact that had been a dare. I worked on it through the cheese course. Several possibilities. One, she had begun to suspect, in the way partners sometimes do, that something was changing in me, that I was at the edge of asking her to marry me, or at the edge of something else, and she was testing the floor. Two, she had simply been emboldened. The story had landed well at brunches and lunches and bottomless mimosas, and the cumulative success of telling it without me had eroded, in her, the small original instinct that had prevented her from telling it in front of me. She had begun to believe she could get away with anything because she had been getting away with a great deal. Three, and this was the one I disliked the most, and therefore the one I gave the most weight. She had begun to want me to know. Some part of her had grown tired of the asymmetry of it, the private knowledge, the secret currency, and she had wanted me to see her spend it. The third one was the most dangerous because it implied a level of contempt I had not, until tonight, fully allowed myself to register. I looked at her, across the table, while Bremer told a story about his nephew. She was laughing. Her hand was on Bremer's wife's wrist, the way she touched people when she wanted them to feel chosen. The candlelight was being kind to her cheekbones, which were good cheekbones to begin with, and she was wearing the small gold earrings I had given her last winter. She felt me look at her, and she looked back. Her smile was warm. She had no idea. She has no idea, I thought. That is the most surprising thing in this room. I had assumed, for much of the soup course, that she was conducting a deliberate act of cruelty. Now I understood, watching her, that she was not. Cruelty would have required her to imagine what I felt, and she had not, because she had not for some time now thought of me as a person with an interior. I had become, somewhere along the way, a setting, a piece of furniture she liked, the room she had rotated and improved. I felt something that was not quite sadness. It was an older feeling than sadness. It was the feeling of recognizing a thing about another person that you have been declining for some months to recognize. I refilled my own glass. All right, I thought. After cheese came dessert, a tart, also from scratch, also announced. And after dessert came the slow herding of coats and goodbyes. I walked Bremer and his wife to the door personally. I shook Bremer's hand. He held it a beat too long and looked at me with the slightly stricken expression of a man who has just realized, perhaps from something in my eyes, that the evening was different than the one he had attended. I gave him nothing. I gave him a smile and a drive safely and the small clap on the shoulder that ends an evening between men, and I closed the door behind him. Tomas was last. Ewa had gone ahead to the elevator. Tomas paused at the door with his coat over his arm and said quietly, "Thanks, Henrik." I looked at him. "Any time," I said. He nodded. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. We had been, for a long time, the kind of friends who did not need to say things, and tonight had not been the night to start, but the look he gave me before he turned to go contained, I thought, an apology I would not require him to make. I closed the door. The apartment was quiet in the particular way a hosted apartment is quiet after the guests have gone. The air stirred up, the cushions out of true, the candles burning low. Camille was already in the kitchen, in her stocking feet, beginning to stack plates. She was humming. "That went well," she said. "Didn't it go well? I thought Adiz was going to absolutely die at the thing about your mother." I did not answer her. I took off my jacket. I hung it in the closet. I rolled my sleeves to the elbows, the way I do when I am about to do something that requires my hands. I went into the kitchen and I began, methodically, to clean. This, I think, was the part she did not understand and would not understand for another 40 minutes. I cleaned the kitchen. I cleaned it the way I clean a kitchen when guests have left, which is thoroughly. I scraped plates into the bin. I rinsed and stacked. I loaded the dishwasher in the order I always loaded it, large items first, and I hand-washed the wine glasses because the wine glasses are the good ones and the dishwasher would etch them. I wiped the counters. I wiped them twice. I wrung out the cloth and hung it over the tap. I put away the cheese board, the linen basket, the bread basket, the 2 trivets. I corked the leftover wine. I dried my hands. I did all of this without speaking. Camille tried, at first, to chat at me through the silence. She narrated the evening. She replayed Bremer's nephew's story for her own enjoyment. She said, "I'm exhausted," in the satisfied way of a woman who has performed well and wishes to be told so. She said, at one point, "Are you all right? You're being very quiet." "I'm fine," I said. She accepted that because she wanted to. When the kitchen was finished, I went to the living room and I straightened the cushions and I blew out the candles, one by one. I did not snuff them. I blew them out. The smoke rose in 3 thin, pale lines, and the room smelled, for a moment, of beeswax. I sat down in the chair across from the sofa. "Sit down," I said. She was at the kitchen island, drinking water. Her face changed. "Henrik, come and sit down. I want to talk to you." She came. She came carrying her water glass, which she set on the coffee table between us, and she sat on the sofa with her legs tucked under her in the small girlish way she sat when she wanted to be seen as soft, and she looked at me with an expression I had not, in our entire time together, seen on her face before. It was wary. She was wary of me. That was new information, and I noted it, and I set it aside. I had thought, while I was washing the wine glasses, about what I was going to say. I had drafted it and revised it and discarded the draft and started again. I had concluded, no version of this conversation that benefited from elaboration. Elaboration would only give her surfaces to argue against. The thing to do was to be plain. The story about my mother and the piano, I said, was not yours to tell. She opened her mouth. I haven't finished, I said, and she closed it. I kept my voice level. This was important. I had been a man with a temper once, a long time ago, in another life, and I had taught myself out of it because I had learned what a temper costs you in rooms where the other person is composed. Composure, I had come to understand, is not the absence of feeling, it is the management of it. I felt a great deal sitting across from her in that lamplit room, but none of it was going to be available to her tonight. That story, I said, was told to you in confidence. I told it to you on the floor of our bedroom on the night your mother called. I told it to you because I trusted you. I did not tell it to you because I wanted it served at dinner. She started to speak again. I'm not finished, I said. I noticed something tonight. I want to tell you what I noticed, and then you can have whatever turn you would like to have. I noticed that nobody at the table was hearing that story for the first time. Adiz leaned forward like she'd been waiting for it. Bremer smiled like a man being given a cue. You have physically held her face still. Tomas looked at me. Camille, and I want you to understand what it means that Tomas felt he had to look at me to check whether I was all right. She had gone very pale, in the particular way a person goes pale when an outcome they had not modeled is suddenly in the room with them. I don't know how many times you've told that story, I said. I don't actually want to know. I imagine it's been months. I imagine there are versions of it. I imagine there are other stories about my mother, about me, about us that you've been telling because the way Adiz said the word saint to me at the table was not the way a woman uses that word about a man she's only met 3 times. It was the word of a woman who's been told a great deal. Henrik, she said. Her voice was small. I know you didn't mean it the way I'm describing it, I said. I'm not interested in what you meant. What you meant is between you and yourself, and I don't have any standing in that conversation. What I have standing in is what was done. You took something I gave you in private, and you made it a piece of dinner party material, and you did it tonight in front of me on purpose, and the part that I want you to sit with, I don't want you to answer me, I want you to sit with it, is that you did it with so little awareness of me as a person that you genuinely did not anticipate that I would mind. That's not fair. I didn't. It is fair, I said, and I'd like you to stop talking for another minute, please. She stopped. I looked at her. I looked at her the way I had not, perhaps, looked at her in some time. Her face was familiar. I had loved this face. I had loved it across a number of mornings and a number of arguments and a number of small ordinary moments that had accumulated, the way they do, into a life. I had bought the ring. The ring was at this moment in the second drawer of my dresser, 10 meters from where she was sitting. We're done, I said. She made a sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a person makes when something they had not believed was possible turns out to have been possible the entire time. I'm not angry, I said, and this was true. I had checked on the way through the dishes, and I was not. I want you to hear that. This isn't a punishment. I'm not doing this to teach you anything. I'm doing it because tonight I learned something about how you see me, and what I learned isn't something I can unlearn, and I'm not willing to spend the next several years pretending I can. So we're done. You'll stay here tonight if you want to. I'll sleep in the study. Tomorrow we'll work out the rest of it like adults. There's no rush and there's no drama. But the relationship is over, and I want you to understand that this isn't a conversation in which you're going to change my mind. Henrik, she said. Henrik, please, it was a story. It wasn't, please, can we talk about this? We just talked about it, I said. She started to cry. I had expected her to cry. The crying was not, I noted, immediate. It had taken her a beat to arrive at it, and it arrived with a certain practice quality, and I observe this without judgment because I have cried strategically in my life too, and I do not hold it against people that they read for the tools they have. I let her cry. I did not move from my chair. I did not go to her. I had spent a great many hours of my life going to her when she cried, and I had done it gladly, and I would not be doing it tonight. I love you, she said through it. I believe you think you do, I said. That sat in the room for a long moment. I'm going to bed, I said. I stood up. There are clean sheets in the hall closet if you'd rather have the bedroom. I'll take the study. We can talk in the morning about logistics. I'd like you to be out by the end of the week, if that's manageable. If it isn't, we'll work it out. I'm not going to make this hard on you. I'm just not going to be in it anymore. She looked up at me. Her face was wet, and her makeup had begun to do what makeup does. And there was, for one moment, a flash of something else in her eyes. Not grief, not even quite anger, but a startled, almost offended recognition. The recognition of a woman who had believed, until approximately 7 minutes ago, that she had a great deal of room. That the leash, if there had been a leash, was held by her. It was, I thought, the most honest expression I had seen on her face in a year. I went into the bedroom. I took a pillow and the spare duvet from the closet. I went to the study, and I made up the small couch in there the way I used to make up bunks when I was a boy, hospital corners, the duvet folded twice at the foot. I undressed. I brushed my teeth in the half bath off the study, which I had installed 3 years ago and which I now remembered with a small distant amusement that Camille had fought me on at the time on the grounds that it was unnecessary. I lay down in the dark. I had expected, I suppose, to lie awake, to turn it over, to relitigate the dinner, scene by scene, the way the mind wants to. I did not. I lay in the dark for perhaps 4 minutes, and I thought about my mother who was alive and well and had, in fact, sold the piano for reasons that were her own and that I had, by the age of about 20, come to understand and even to forgive, and I thought about how the story of the piano was not, when I really considered it, even a sad story, so much as a story about a particular kind of love that had to make hard choices in a hard time. And I thought about how that was the part Camille had. Cut out when she told it, because that part was not funny. And then I thought, the woman I marry will know what part of that story matters. And then I rolled onto my side, and I slept. I slept, I would say, better than I had slept in some months. When I woke up, it was light. The apartment had a particular quality of stillness that I recognized from mornings after long trips, when I had come home to a place that had been empty in my absence. I lay in the unfamiliar bed for a moment, and I listened. There was no one in the kitchen. There was no shower running. The radiator clicked. A pigeon on the windowsill moved. I got up. I put on my robe. I walked through the apartment. She had gone. She had taken a suitcase, the medium one, the one she used for long weekends. She had taken her toothbrush and her face creams and the pair of shoes she wore to work and the cardigan she liked and the book she had been reading. She had not taken the earrings I had given her, which she had left on the dresser in a small, careful pile, and she had not taken the framed photograph from our trip 2 summers ago, which she had turned face down on the bookshelf. She had left a note on the kitchen counter, weighted with the salt cellar. I read it. It was 3 sentences long. It said that she would arrange to collect the rest of her things by the end of the week. It said she was sorry. It said that she hoped one day I would understand. I read it twice. I folded it. I put it in the drawer where I kept takeout menus and warranty cards because I did not, at that moment, have a better drawer for it. I did not want to make a decision about it yet. I made coffee. I stood at the kitchen window with the coffee in my hands, and I looked out at the morning, which was the ordinary gray gold of an ordinary weekday morning, and I noticed, with a small surprise that was not really a surprise, that the apartment felt different. Not lighter exactly, not emptier. It felt, I thought, like a coat that had been let out and was now sitting properly on the shoulders again. The room I was standing in was the room I had moved into for years before I had ever met her, with a chair and a lamp and a kettle. And that man, the one who had moved in alone, had been a perfectly good tenant, and the apartment had, over the course of the last hour or so of her absence, remembered him. I drank the coffee. I thought about Tomas. I thought I would call him later, not to talk about it. There was nothing to talk about, but because he was a friend, and because the look he had given me at the door had been a debt I owed him in the form of letting him know that I was all right. I thought about my mother. I thought I would call her too on Sunday, the way I always did, and I thought I would not tell her any of this because it was not the kind of thing she needed to know, and because the story of her piano was finally, after this long detour, mine again. I rinsed a coffee cup. I set it upside down on the rack to dry. I walked back through the apartment, slowly, the way a man walks through a house he has just bought. In the bedroom, I opened the second drawer of the dresser. The ring was where I had left it. I looked at it for a moment. Then I closed the drawer and I went to get dressed, and I began the day.
Thanks for listening.